Years had passed, but some wounds had never healed. On a chilly morning in autumn, the bell above the small cafe door chimed softly, its sound carrying more weight than anyone inside could imagine. The scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries lingered in the air, and behind the counter, a woman wiped her hands on her apron, unaware that the ghost of her past was about to step inside. At one of the corner tables, a little girl swung her legs restlessly, tracing shapes on the wooden surface with her tiny finger. The moment her eyes lifted and locked on the man entering, her voice trembled yet rang out with a clarity that silenced the room. "Daddy?" Everyone froze. The word echoed like thunder in the quiet cafe. The man in the expensive tailored suit, sharper, older, and carrying the weight of years, stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened, his breath hitched, and his carefully built facade of control cracked. The cafe owner, Amelia, turned at the sound of her daughter's voice. Her heart dropped to the floor when her gaze landed on him. Nicholas Hayes. The man who had once been her whole world. The man who had walked away when she needed him most. And now, after all this time, he stood in her cafe, staring at the child who bore his eyes. Life hadn't been easy for Amelia. Years ago, when Nicholas had chosen his career, ambition, and the ruthless world of CEOs over love, she had been left alone, pregnant, scared, and determined to survive. She worked endless shifts, slept too little, and dreamed too small just to make ends meet. The cafe was her miracle, built with sweat, tears, and faith. Her daughter, Lily, was her reason to keep breathing when nights grew heavy and loneliness screamed too loud. She had promised herself never to need anyone again, least of all the man who had shattered her heart. But here he was. Flesh and blood. And worse. Lily had recognized him without ever being told. Nicholas's chest tightened as he saw the resemblance he could no longer deny, the tilt of her chin, the dimple when she smiled uncertainly, the sparkle in her eyes. His daughter. His little girl. Regret crashed into him like waves breaking against cliffs. For years, he had chased success, built empires, and filled his calendar with meetings and deals. But in his quietest moments, when applause faded and boardrooms emptied, he thought of Amelia. He thought of what he had lost. And now, staring at Lily, he realized he had lost more than he ever knew. Amelia's voice was steady but carried years of buried pain. "Finish your drink, Lily. We have work to do." She refused to let her emotions show, refused to crumble in front of him. Nicholas stepped forward, his usually confident steps faltering. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in decades. She's mine." Amelia turned her back to him, busying herself with cups and trays, her hands trembling despite her effort. What difference would it make now, But fate had a cruel way of forcing hearts to confront what they ran from. Over the next weeks, Nicholas returned to the cafe, not as the CEO everyone feared, but as a man desperate to bridge the years he had thrown away. Lily, in her innocence, welcomed him with the purity of a child's heart. She would run to the door when the bell chimed, holding up her drawings, asking him questions, calling him Daddy, as if the word had always belonged. And Amelia, she fought with herself. She saw Nicholas kneeling on the floor, letting Lily braid his hair with ribbons, laughing for the first time in years. She saw his eyes soften, his hands gentler than she remembered. And slowly, against her will, the walls around her heart began to crack. But healing wasn't easy. There were nights when Nicholas sat outside the cafe after closing, waiting just for a chance to speak to Amelia. Nights when she stood behind the curtain, watching him through glass, torn between slamming the door or letting him in. "Why now, Nicholas?" she demanded one evening, unable to contain it any longer. "Why after all these years? You don't get to just walk back in." His reply was raw, stripped of pride. "Because I finally realized what all the money, all the success, all the empty houses couldn't give me. A family. You. Her. I was a coward then. But I'm not walking away this time. Amelia wanted to believe him, but fear clung to her like a shadow. She had built her world on resilience, on never depending on anyone again. But then came the night Lily fell sick. The fever was high, her little body trembling, and panic clawed at Amelia's heart. Nicholas stayed. He rushed with them to the hospital, refused to leave her side, held Amelia's shaking hand when she broke down. He whispered to Lily, telling her stories, singing softly until her breathing steadied. And in that moment, Amelia saw not the CEO, not the man who had once hurt her, but the father Lily had always deserved. Days turned into weeks, and walls turned into bridges. The café, once a symbol of Amelia's independence, became a place where laughter echoed louder than pain. Customers often watched in quiet wonder as the once untouchable Nicholas Hayes wiped tables with his sleeves rolled up, or played hide-and-seek with Lily between shelves of pastries. And Amelia, though still guarded, felt her heart soften with every act of sincerity. The road wasn't perfect. Forgiveness doesn't come wrapped in pretty bows. There were tears, doubts, and relapses into silence. But through it all, Nicholas stayed. He showed up. He chose them, not because it was easy, but because it was finally the right thing to do. And Amelia began to realize something she had once sworn she never would, that love, when it's fought for,